G'day Central. Welcome to something else new. I'm Stu, and Scott's going to be joining me today, and the new thing that we're going to be doing is talking about some theology. That's exciting. We are socially isolated, aren't we? We're socially isolated, but we keep trying to remind ourselves that doesn't mean we have to be disconnected. So here's the plan. We're going to talk, Scott and I, about some big theological attributes of God. We're going to gather together separately, but we're going to gather together around His Word, learn some great things about what He's like while we're sitting at home, while we're pondering, while we've got maybe a bit of free time on our hands. Go, Scott.
Hey, Stu.
Thanks for coming in.
Great to be here.
So again, we're doing something new, and this new thing is talking about the attributes of God. And I guess we're creatures, we've been made by God, so the first responsibility of us is to know what He's like, I suppose, isn't it? So we look at the characteristic of His infiniteness.
Yep.
That's what we'll look at. I guess, how do we know that God is infinite?
Yeah. Like all of these characteristics of God, we find out about God because He revealed Himself to us in His Word. Job 11 is one of those passages which is a beautiful description of God. It comes to a bunch of questions, but it's really these rhetorical questions which are saying we can't put a limit on God. He is without measure. And so these questions, can you find out the deep things of God? It's as though the answer is no, of course you can't.
Yeah.
Can you find out the limit of the Almighty? No way. It is higher than heaven. What can you do? Deeper than Sheol. What can you know? Its measure is longer than the earth and broader than the sea. There's a great contrast there, isn't there? What can we do? What can we know of the God who is without limit? We can't know Him fully. We can't find out the limit of God. He is beyond us. He is the one who is without measure. And this description of God as being infinite applies, I think, to all of His characteristics. It's as though it's a meta characteristic of God. So in saying that, it means He is infinite in all of His nature. He is infinite in His power. He is infinite in His wisdom. He is infinite in His knowledge. He is infinite in His love. He is infinite in His beauty. He is infinite in His mercy. He is infinite in so many ways. We just can't measure God. And so we get to some of those other much loved passages like Jeremiah 32, which speaks about nothing being too hard for God. We find things hard. There's lots of stuff I wish I could do that I just can't do.
Yeah.
God never has that problem.
Yeah.
We find ourselves getting tired. Isaiah 40, though, tells us that God Himself doesn't grow weary. He doesn't get tired.
Okay.
Isn't that beautiful?
That's great. And look, I guess for Bible geeks like you, that's fascinating stuff, and it's great to read that in your Bible. But I wonder if I might ask the question: is that just fascinating theology? You know, what's the takeaway by you? What's important about us as creatures knowing those things?
Yeah, I think in getting to know God better, we get to know ourselves as well. And so we are image bearers of God, but we need to realise that in these characteristics of God, that there are some that we share with God, and there's some that we don't. So we talk about the communicable attributes and the incommunicable attributes of God. So the communicable ones are the ones which God has communicated to us, so we can be like God in some ways. But the incommunicable attributes of God are just for God. And this is one of those. God alone is infinite. You and I have our limitations, of course. We have things that we are measured by. We are not like God, nor should we expect to be like God. So you have limits. I have limits. I am a certain height. My wife asked me to get something out of the top cupboard of the kitchen the other day, and I couldn't reach it. I couldn't get there. I needed a ladder. We're a certain age, aren't we, Stu?
Yeah. Especially today.
Especially today. Stu's birthday today, everybody. Happy birthday.
Thanks. Yeah, I know my limits. I like to test the limits, but I know at the end of the day, I have my limits. My son loves measuring himself against me.
Yep.
Because he's found now that he's taller than me, and he loves pointing to the mark on the wall that shows Dad, and he actually loves that. You know, there's
Yeah.
something good about being able to measure.
Yeah.
What do you think that might be?
There's some comfort there, isn't there, in knowing that, well, even that we have somebody else's measure,
Right.
that somebody isn't beyond us. And look, and that's interesting as we relate to one another. It's part, I think, of our relationship with one another, that there can be a beauty about knowing one another well and knowing our limits, and even knowing ourselves well and knowing our limits. But when it comes to God, well, that just won't be the case. He has no limits.
Just reading that book that you've been reading, Jen Wilkins's book on God's attributes, and she makes this comment that we are glory stealers. What do you think she means when she talks about us as being glory stealers?
Yeah, and I think we are. I think this is part of our problem, that we are made in God's image, and I think she makes this point that we are made to be image bearers, but we are not made actually to be just like God. And that is what we want. We want the glory. And way back when it came to the very first sin in the Garden of Eden, it was about not being satisfied with being the creature, but actually wanting to be just like God, to have all of his attributes. We don't like the limitations sometimes that are imposed upon us. And that means, well, we enter into the sin of demanding more than we actually truly are.
And what do you think that is? Why would we want to steal God's glory? Why would we want to be like him? Does the Bible help us with that?
Yeah, well, we hate the authority that God has. We want to have the first place. Sin is more about pride than it is about humility. Sin is feeling like I know better, and I ought to be able to do things my way. I want to push outside of the boundaries that are rightly given to me. We all know the dangerous place that leads, though, that we are living the best way when we are living within the boundaries and the limitations that God has.
And there must be
us.
something to do with trust there as well, hey, because we kind of hate the fact that the government has authority over us, and they have a sort of you might say, limitless control over us. There's a sense there where we have to trust them.
That God is actually good.
Hard, isn't it?
This God who is limitless and all powerful and almighty is actually also good for us. Yeah.
And when the government gets that right, and we think, in relation to COVID-19, we kind of think that they've got that right. Here we are. We're measured.
Leaving a gap.
We're leaving a gap, and we can only be two of us. And there's all these sort of. When it's working well, it's kind of
it's good.
Thing.
Yeah.
So, tell me, Jesus took on a limited form, didn't he? He was born in a certain place, and he had limitations, I presume, except when he walked on water.
Yeah.
What's the significance? Bring it back to the gospel. What is the significance of Jesus doing that?
Yeah, it is incredible, isn't it? That here then is this infinite God who took on flesh, who took on human form, came to live in our world and suffered through the sorts of limitations that we feel. So he had a body, he felt pain. He was a man of a certain height and of a certain age. He experienced all those things. And I think there's a beauty in that, isn't there, of knowing that our God could so relate to us, and therefore that we can relate to him. How beautiful that is. But that also this God came into our world and took all of that on to bear the sin, that same sin that we were talking about before, where we want to grasp all of the fullness of God. We want to be like God. Even for that sin, God came into the world to die for us so that we can get to know him. We will never know him fully, but there's a beauty of then having a relationship with God and living in worship of this one who is completely limitless.
Yeah, and I guess that shows us that in some ways we can trust the limit. It shows we can trust the unlimited God with his unlimited resources
Amen.
in our limited world. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate
Thanks, Stu.
it. You're welcome. Thanks for joining us. I hope that you found that helpful. And we're looking forward to doing a few more of those in the coming weeks, maybe looking at what God's knowledge is like and what his power is like and his immutability. You might have to go look that up and find out what it means. But thanks for being with us, and hope you can join with us next time.